I think I would start with the whole ecosystem coming from the consumer. I think the consumer in today's world is far more digitally savvy, aware what's happening in the market, aware. It's also getting fully, competent in terms of the choices he or she can make, which means that leading inside the organization, the people have to also gear up to capture those opportunities and seize those opportunities. So I think digitization is one very big factor, more aware consumers. Because of digitization and internet, I think we may be talking to a local consumer, but who's globally aware of what's happening. So I think we need talent in the organization which may be focusing on a consumer in India, but needs to be globally aware of what's happening in the category. So I think these are the skills, these are the opportunities where we have to look for globally thinking talent, but maybe locally relevant talent. That's a big one, which I would say.
So I'll Vipul add maybe a couple of other points to that what you said, right? So one, I think the consumer is now looking at a lot more instant gratification, and which means that the whole choice making process and discretionary spending, etc., actually fundamentally shifts from what it was earlier, where the person would perhaps purchase something, giving themselves a lot of time, when they have enough money in the pocket. Today, that's not the case. The second is that access to cash, in a very sort of simplistic way, is much better actually today.
True. Very true.
I remember that there was a time when interest rates used to be 14 to 20, 25%, and not for personal loans, but just, for example, consumer durable loans, which today is accessible at a much, much cheaper rate. And, the whole buy now, pay later kind of a philosophy with, particularly with younger consumers, is something which is sort of pushing the boundaries in a very different kind of a way today, actually.
True. The other factor which I would say, which is impacting the consumer goods industry, is that it always was a bipolar market, but I think it is becoming accentuated. So there is one side of the market which is purely price, no experience, sheer volume market, and being driven in one particular manner. And the second side of the market is experiential market, where consumer wants to go through the experience in the journey and look at the change in the store, look at the change in the retail formats in the country, and therefore the experiential part, or what you call the consumer experience journey, is becoming more and more relevant. So we need people in consumer goods industry who can understand, dissect the data and say what is the consumer experience journey and how decisions are going to be made in them, and therefore be able to dial up into each segment of it. So we need multi-skilled people. We need people who are not only that I just know digital marketing. No, we need a marketing person who understands shopper insight. We need a person who understands consumer insights, how product will it, how will he deal with the R&D people, how will he innovate out there. So we need a person who's got big dimensional skills. And even so, to say that a marketing person will be like this and a salesperson, I think the definitions are changing and they're crossing over. The sales guy also needs to understand what is marketing. Otherwise, how will he develop a strategy? So the real question which comes with that, we need talent which is multi-skilled. If not, how do we skill them up in an organization? How do we develop them? How do we train them up? How do we give them exposure and yet keep it motivated?
Yeah. I think there are a couple of other aspects to look at, when you look at the whole industry. Maybe two I will reflect on. So one, the traditional way of cutting the markets was by town A, town B, town C, and you would categorize Sec A, Sec A, Sec B, Sec C kind of thing. Those definitions I think are passé now.
Absolutely.
Because the way market research needs to be done, the way aspirations of consumers need to be looked at is actually very, very different today. And I personally believe that companies are on the journey, but long way to go still. That's one aspect. I think the other is that what is discretionary spending? What do you spend on? So, fundamentally many things which are considered a discretionary product are actually no more a discretionary product. People see them as, something which I would spend in as part of my sort of budget, either monthly or quarterly or annual and so on and so forth. But these are fundamental shifts in the market, which I think people inside organizations needs to understand very, very deeply. as they build their own capabilities and skills, and even the way you design organizations, I think have to be very different actually.
And I think taking another point from where what you're saying, Bimal, is that I think historically organizations have, and for no good or bad reasons, developed people in verticals. There was a manufacturing person, there was an R&D person, there was a finance person, then the sales guy, and there's a marketing person. I think the world of today is that each one of them need to have a much higher understanding of the sensitivity of the other person to be able to co-create and support.
Yeah.
The manufacturing guy and the R&D need to understand what is the latest thing happening in the consumer and be proactive and start thinking in that dimension. So I think rotation of people make other departments understand sensitization, how leadership gets developed, how leadership programs are developed in an organization to carry everybody with them. I think the need is probably bigger than before. It was always there, but I think the need has become bigger.
I think there are three, from what you said, Vipul, I think there are three buckets of sort of activity, if I may call it that, right? Firstly, really understanding what the industry is going through at a global level, at the local level, and also possibly at the micro local level, because consumers in one part of the geography may have a very different need or in a different strata and so on and so forth, number one. Also, the second part is that there are generations. So somebody who's a 55-year-old consumer, we have typically seen them as different from a 35-year-old consumer. Now, I'm not sure how many of those assumptions are valid. True. So maybe go back and revalidate some of those assumptions from a consumer perspective. And thirdly, then, and the point you're making that, how do you therefore develop internal capabilities to be able to address both of these,
Absolutely.
In a sort of a both structured manner, but at the same time a bit of a fluid manner, because the markets and consumers are changing very, very quickly.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think taking another point from where you said, Bimal, I think very well said. So organizations have lived with generations. It's not that organizations are not lived with generations. I think the coming of the internet, the generations are I won't say diverse and moving away apart, but I think the gap between the generations is far more pronounced now than it was any time earlier. Because I think the internet has played a very big impact. But to say that, one generation is not good, second generation is not good, I don't think organizations are going to live like that. Organizations to gear up the capability of how you will work with these generations and get them to motivate them and work them. So therefore, continuous training, continuous development, continuous speaking to the employees, speaking to the customer, and bringing back into a learning and development journey is an integral part of very integral part of success of an organization. I think the timing of this, I think there's a pre-COVID, there's a COVID, and there's a post-COVID. I think the post-COVID era is a real opportunity to see how we can have different generations work in an organization, develop them, talent them, empower them, build programs along with them. And the reason I say that is that in the pre-COVID period, I think the level of digitization was not to the same level. But I think the post-COVID period, organizations across sizes have opportunities to create centers of excellence inside the company, centers of excellence outside the company, and leverage it. I mean, I look around and I see on LinkedIn, there is so much available. But you have to choose which one to go, where to go, how to go, what to do.